All right. Here we are. We are live. Welcome, welcome, everyone. I am so excited to um, invite the beautiful Maria. I met Maria Ruberto at my daughter's school meeting. It was a parent information night, and they had Maria join us. Maria is a psychologist, and she is a master trainer as well in resilience for kids. So it's a big topic for us, Maria, resilience, because we teach on emotional resilience for parents. So our work in Empowered Parents is all about the parent. And
Right.
even the parents come in, say, please fix my kids, Yolanda. I'm like, nope, I'm gonna support you first, because you will then fix your kid when it comes naturally to you. So that's what we're all about. And I loved the fact that you are about resilience, and more importantly, that you go deeper. What you shared that night at Avila College was, it really gave, it felt like it gave so much more context to what we teach our parents when you talk about the science and the biology behind what we've been saying for so long. I love the, was that
Parallel processing.
parallel processing that resonated straight on. So we can't wait to hear from you. Tell us a little bit about you, and let's just dive into the amazing information that you have packed for us today, Maria. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Yolanda, for the invitation, and welcome to all of the parents who have come online this evening. We only have half an hour, and there is always so much to share. So I'd like to begin by saying that this year is the 30th year that I'm in my trade. So 30 years has gone very, very quickly, and along the way there have been many challenges in the area of psychology, and we are starting to only tip the iceberg into understanding that there is a very big role to play in prevention and proactive mental fitness, which is something that I'd like to talk about. So the concept of mental fitness is the idea that any type of fitness requires a plan and it requires repetition, and mental fitness is no different. So the idea that we take a number of strategies and that we begin to use and apply those strategies in a repeated fashion, even when we think they aren't working. You know, when we start off with a physical fitness regime, we start with some weights, or we might start with some walking. And the first couple of weeks we go, this isn't working. I must be doing something wrong. I should be doing something different. Maybe I should be doing Pilates. Maybe I should be doing Zumba. Maybe I should be. But the reality is that any type of conditioning, any type of strengthening that we need to do actually needs to start off small, and that the repetition becomes important. So some of tonight's content is about just giving us information, and then some of the contents are about some strategies. So I'd like to just quickly share my screen, because I think it would be great to just introduce this concept that we are very passionate about here at Salutegenics, which is the concept of how do we manage behaviour that sometimes can be challenging, and how do we manage behaviour that is sometimes unwarranted, and then sometimes we are not ready for. And the idea is that for a long time, as parents, we have been driven to respond to the behaviour that we have in front of us. But the reality is that there is so much happening on a biological level that if we were to shift our perspective as carers and as parents into understanding the biology of our young people, we would have a much better opportunity in understanding the behaviour that's being presented, because sometimes the behaviours are misinterpreted. So I just wanted to start off by this idea that we have a reset button. I have so many parents come to me like you, Yolanda, and they will say, can you fix my daughter? Can you fix my husband? Can you fix my wife? Can you fix this depression? Can you fix the anxiety? Unfortunately, because we are organic in nature, there is no fixing. But the concept of reset becomes very important. The idea that we have capacity, you have capacity as a parent to be incredibly influential to your child, and you are in an incredibly powerful position, even when there are times that you feel that you are not. The idea of the reset is that we teach skills so that you are able to reset your own levels. We can't change other people and we can't change their mind, and certainly we can't do that with our young people. But we can talk about some strategies and some understandings so that you as a parent are able to reset when you feel you are a bit wobbly, when you feel like you are a bit unstable in terms of, feeling like you are in control or that you're managing. The idea of reset is that you push your own button and know why you're pushing it and what is it that you're aiming for. So we'll talk about this as we go through this evening.
Such a powerful tool, Maria, just have parents to have that awareness, because we are so conditioned to go to the doctor and say, fix me, which correct. Is why we have this idea that the fixing is external. Love it that the button is within us, the reset
it's
button.
Within us. Yes, correct. But let's have a look at the Australian Childhood Foundation. They collected a whole lot of data during COVID, and I wanted to share this with you because I think as parents we need to be informed about how most of Australian parents were feeling. So this was published in August 2020, probably just several months into the virus, COVID virus in Australia. But what they found at the end of this study was that children relied more on the care and support of parents who themselves were struggling to cope. And I think that's a very big statement to make, because the lockdown impacted families in a significant way. And unfortunately, we are no longer talking about it, but the residual effect is what we've been left with. So I just want to talk a little bit about what they found. They said that 48% of parents said that their children needed more reassurance. 63% said that their children needed them more as a parent. That's a very interesting thing. What does that look like? When my child needs me more, what does that look like? Are they calling my name more? Are they in close proximity more? Are they losing their initiative to do things on their own? So that's a very interesting statistic. 26% felt that during lockdown they were failing as a parent. 36% that they felt less confident. 41% said they were worried that their mental health was affecting their child negatively. It's a very strong statement. And in psychology, we know that that is absolutely true. Our state and the state that we are in significantly impacts a child's state. 35% said they felt isolated as a parent. So when we have a look at those statistics, what we know is this: the effects of confinement, so the effects of being within a boundary and not being able to move outside of those boundaries, have the implication of social isolation. And there is loss of freedom, loss of disconnection, and boredom, but most of all uncertainty. And I want to talk a little bit more about uncertainty in a moment. But what we saw is that during this time, social isolation means that you stop practicing social skills. Social isolation means that you are less likely to practice social empathy, compassion with other people, turn taking, using people's names when you greet them, the eye contact, what you do with your tone. And for some families where their children were in significant developmental periods, those young people were really missing some very fundamental social structures and also social learning. But for some other students, but for some other children, because they weren't practicing these social skills, and adults too, what we found is this concept called social atrophy. And social atrophy is a wasting away of our confidence, of our social confidence. And because we weren't regularly practicing the skills, we started to deteriorate in our ability to connect in a way that allowed us to feel confident. Now that sounds odd, but it's had huge repercussions. And some of the repercussions that are not spoken about is what has been the impact on the brain. And there is and I'm going to show you an image in a moment, but there is a part of the brain called the primitive part that sits in the very center of the brain. So there's this beautiful work that's being done by Daniel Siegel where he talks about the hand brain. And you will be able to find it on YouTube. And it's just a lovely explanation. But when we talk about the primitive brain, we're talking about the inside of our brain. So not the squiggly bit on the outside, but just the very inside of the brain.
Not the prefrontal cortex. It's the amygdala.
The amygdala. So here is your limbic system, and this is the amygdala here. And if we put that there in the middle, and then we close our fingers over, you can see that our fingers look a little bit like the prefrontal cortex.
Mm-hmm.
And so our primitive brains during periods of confinement actually sent our bodies into a very strong defensive state. And the defensive state is there for a reason. It's there because the primitive brain has been given signals to inform us that our outside world is no longer safe. And because we were in this confinement for a long period of time, or even if it wasn't confinement, because there were some states that weren't as locked down as Victoria, some of the other states that were hearing about the impact of the virus and how detrimental it was, that was enough for our primitive brains to move us into states of defense. And we end up with anxiety. So when we're talking about how do we respond, the aim is never not to trigger anxiety. And I know that feels counterintuitive, but anxiety plays a very important part in our society. It alerts us to threat. It alerts us to challenges that we need to prepare for. So anxiety has a very important part where it just gives our brain and our body information that we've just got to prepare because something is about to happen that we need to upskill, or that we need to lift resources, or that we may need to stop and problem solve so that we're able to manage what's about to come. The issue is that if we become stuck in the anxiety and our brain becomes stuck in this defensive state. So I want to show you some data because I think this is probably one of the most breathtaking data that we've seen of late. And I want to show your parents, Yolanda, that at the moment our numbers in Australia in terms of how many people are being diagnosed with either anxiety or depression, which are our high prevalence disorders, are 2 in 5. So 2 in 5 Australians are currently diagnosed with anxiety, depression, or perhaps a mood disorder. And these numbers are very, very high. And in fact, some of the diagnostic presentations that we're seeing are also resistant to treatment. So treatment that used to work really well before COVID, post-COVID seems to have had a number of obstacles where the treatment doesn't seem to fall as well. And there are a number of reasons for that, but let's see if we can talk about that later on.
Wow, that's very interesting. Yeah, I want to know about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if we have a look at this
I just
data,
want to interrupt for a little while, Maria. We've got lots of parents on watching. I would just love to encourage the parents that Maria is here. We've got her for the next 25 minutes. We would love for you to put in your questions. She is willing to answer. So as we go about our talk, if you have something that's caught your attention and you have a burning question, or even if it's a question that you might think it's silly, but so many other parents will benefit from. And of course, it gives us an opportunity to really go and take a deep dive into the wealth of knowledge that Maria has with us. So let's bring those questions on, parents.
Wonderful.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Yolanda. If we have a look at this graph, on the left-hand side, the vertical line, which is our y-axis, we have the percentage of symptoms. So, for example, some people will be suffering 25% of symptoms, 50%, 75%, 100%. The higher the percentage rates, the greater the interference that these symptoms have in the quality of our lives. We're overly fatigued, we can't have a shower, we can't cook for ourselves, we become removed, we're disconnected from life, we may not be going to school, maybe not going to work. So that's just an indication of the percentage of symptoms. On the x-axis, it goes across down the bottom, we have percentage of resilience. Now this becomes very interesting. As you go across there, you have a 25% mark, so people who have 25% resilience, or they're using 50% resilience, 70%, 85%, and 100% is the top amount of, well, it's the 100% resilience. When we have a look at the colours in the graph, and I don't want to spend too much time because the message here is very simple, but when we have a look at the colours, the blue line, which is depression, finishes at the top teal line. So depression starts from the blue line and it finishes at the top teal line. Anxiety starts at the top yellow line, but it finishes at the bottom teal line. The teal is just the crossover. So the first thing that we realise is that there are a lot of comorbidities. There are many symptoms that are both symptoms of anxiety and symptoms of depression. So today it can be very difficult to say that's only anxiety or that's only depression. And when we are working with our young people and even with ourselves as parents, I think the message here is less about what I have and more about what is happening for me that is interfering with the quality of my life. And that's a very big shift to take because it impacts on how treatment is received. But if we have a look, you can actually see that there is a very big mass in the middle of this graph. And that sort of shows us that, you know, anywhere between, say, on the x-axis down the bottom, anywhere between, say, 15% to about 85%, you can see that there is a significant amount of symptoms that people are experiencing across the board in any 1 year. But the point of this graph here, Yolanda, is really important. If you go to the very left of the graph, where there are 100% symptoms in anxiety, but where there are high levels of about 60 to about 97%. If you look right down the bottom, there is zero resilience. When you go across the graph and you have a look at the people who have the highest level of resilience, anywhere between 85 and 100, you look up and you see that there are no symptoms. So what we are learning is that when we focus all of our attention as parents and even as students into reducing the symptoms or making the symptoms better, the argument here is we may only be doing a quarter of the work, because what we really need to be doing is that when we start to raise our levels of resilience and not focus on the deficit, just know how to create well-being, know how to be resilient, start to apply these strategies, we are inadvertently reducing the levels of symptoms just by way of applying resilient strategies. So this is a very,
we talk about
big
awareness,
shift.
Maria. Would that be similar? We say awareness is key. Just being aware of tools and strategies is so
absolutely
key.
First of all, being aware of them and knowing what they are and knowing how to apply them. So, for example, we know that having conversations with other people, so inviting conversations of care. How are you? Tell me about what happened to you today. So as parents, when we try and connect with our young people, that the connection is not one of is not one of power, but it's one of care. And so how we ask, the time we give to that question, how we respond. We know that caring conversations has an enormous part to play in the development of mental fitness in our young people. So
I'll also say for the parents, what I can hear parents commonly say is, my child will just roll their eyes and walk away, Yolanda, which is why we say to them, take a step back and manage yourself, because your child is picking up where you're from, where you are asking that question from. So I just want to see your point of view on this, because in the work that we do, we bring it back to the parent, Maria, to say, manage your state. If you have anxiety, if you are at edge, your child is feeling judged by you, your child is feeling resistance from you. Whatever, you might be following all the right tools and strategies, you're just not going to connect. Would that be fair to say?
That's very fair to say. So there's a part of our brain, Yolanda, that is in the primitive area, and that part of the brain, which is the hippocampus, but also there's the anterior cingulate cortex. There is also the fusiform gyrus that sits in our brain. There are parts of the inside primitive area of our brain that is specifically wired to pick up cues in another person underneath the level of consciousness.
Wow,
And
that's amazing.
Yeah, and our brain is so sophisticated that it picks it up and we don't even know that it's picking it up. And then suddenly we are faced with just having an experience sometimes that we don't even, we're not aware of, or that we haven't even asked for. But I'll give you an example. When your child comes home and says, Jamie didn't play with me today, and in fact, she pushed me around and she said that I can't be her friend anymore, and then scrunched her nose up and walked away. And I cried and I was so upset because Jamie's such a good friend to me and her and I have been good friends for such a long time. As your child is explaining this to you, you as a parent are inadvertently picking up neurologically all of the cues of that emotion, all of the cues of that narrative, all of the cues of that tone, of that distress. And suddenly, and I'll do it using two pens.
I think that's a very powerful point for parents, Maria, to know that neurologically you are picking up your child's anxiety and your child's distress. So being mindful and aware is so key.
So key. And the way that it works is that as your child starts to tell the narrative, their distress starts to spike and it goes up and up and up until, and as they're recounting the story, they are getting really upset and they are becoming quite overwhelmed, and perhaps they could be even flooded. So they may be talking to you and they're in tears. It takes less than 2.3 seconds for your neurological system to then come up, so come up and meet the spike that your child has also experienced. So whilst your child is doing this, in less than a few seconds, you're also doing this, and suddenly what you find is that you are just as distressed as what they are. And we call this parallel processing. And parallel processing is where you parallel the process that your child's neurological state is dishing out to you. And the reason why this is so powerful to know is that when you find yourself in the same distressed state as your child, you have lost your power to have any type of influence. And then what happens? Said. Yeah, but then what happens is that there is an issue. And the issue is that as parents, we then want to go in and fix our child's issue because we don't want our child to feel that distress. We don't want our child to feel so upset. But the reality is, if we go in and start to intervene on the part of the child, that child has no opportunity to learn or to develop their social response and also their capacity to be resilient. We take
Even
the
life skills,
opportunity
isn't
away.
it? That's where we teach our kids life skills.
Absolutely. And a lot of the time we want to resolve our child's issue, not so much because of the issue, but because now we're distressed and we don't want to be distressed. So we don't want to be bothered. We don't want to be inconvenienced. So let's just fix your problem so that I can feel better. And I think as parents, we need to be really, really aware of when we are owning our child's emotion, because the reality is your child's emotion actually doesn't belong to you, belongs to your child. Your
Would it also be fair to say, Maria, that at this point, a lot of parents, I'm not a good enough parent, comes through as well if I'm not able to relieve my child's distress?
Oh, absolutely. We feel like we're failing as a parent. We feel like we don't have answers. We feel like that we're not strong enough, that we're not smart enough. We feel like that we're not dynamic enough. We feel like we don't have enough power to be able to alleviate their distress.
Being aware of the parallel processing that happens is we are able to disconnect and stand back in our power and really be the parent that our child needs us to be in that moment.
Sure. And there's a rule that we talk about when we're teaching emotional competency, and that is the person with the loudest emotion in the room has the greatest power.
Yes.
So
it's good to be aware of that, and that's often our kids, isn't it?
So it's more often than our children. So when our children's emotion becomes very big and very loud, suddenly they seem to be holding a lot of power because we're cowering in saying, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? What can I do for you? And suddenly young people realize that the louder their emotion becomes, the more allocation of attention their child gets from you, your child gets from you. We need to be very careful not to hand that power over too quickly, because children actually don't know what to do with that amount of power. It floods them and they become even more anxious. And that's a very important point. So when we're thinking about how do we respond to parallel processing, the first thing it's really important for us as a parent is to either take a breath and sit down. Don't remain standing, because what that does to the child is that it really signifies to the child that you're not going to overtake them. So it's a good idea to either sit down at the kitchen bench, sit down on the couch, sometimes even sit down on the floor, but let your child speak in their standing, in their overwhelmed state. It's very important for children to just talk about how they are feeling, because most of the times they're not asking for you to solve their problem. They are just asking for you to listen. And Yolanda, this would have to be the most difficult strategy for a parent to implement, because a parent feels that in just listening that they are being ineffective. But
they're having to think up solutions and things like that. Yeah,
correct. But in fact, the recent research shows that people who have other people in their lives who are very good listeners actually develop bigger size brains. And it's a really interesting piece of research that has come out of the state to show that when you have somebody in your life that listens well, your brain, because you're the one who's talking, actually can become stronger and bigger in size, because whilst you're talking about something, you're hearing yourself talk about the detail of the problem, how it feels, what happened to you, and you've got someone who's just bouncing that back to you.
It's
So
like what we do in the mentoring space, Maria. We just listen, and a lot of the time parents can just have so many aha moments just listening to themselves speak out. Would that be the
yes,
same as what you're saying?
yes, it is the same. And at the same time, we also need to be very aware that our young people are needing our empathy and they are needing our compassion. And so being able to use appropriate questions, being able to make the right statements becomes really important. And I think us as parents, we need to learn how to do that.
Yeah. So we teach our parents to put the coach hat on. So that is something that is useful to support our kids, to be the mentor. Just listen to them, and they can let go of being the parent now and become the coach. Like they get coached, they can do that with their kids.
Yeah. So the strategy that we use is that we ask parents to pretend that they have a tape over their mouth.
Oh, love it.
Yes, for the first 3 minutes. So it's quite a structured approach. So for the first 3 minutes, when your child is coming to you and they want to tell you something, imagine that you've put a tape around your mouth where you literally are not able to speak. And I say to parents, look at your watch and then give yourself 3 minutes. And in those 3 minutes, what happens is, because you as a parent are imagining the tape and because you're watching your clock, you are less likely to parallel process, because you are not as drawn in to their emotion. But what you're doing is that you're remaining anchored as a parent, because you're now preparing yourself to hold their space. And we do
That's
that.
a brilliant tip. We just have a parent saying what a brilliant tip that is, Maria.
Yeah. And then after the 3 minute mark, then we take the tape off, not too quickly. And then our job is to ask 5 questions.
Wow.
And those,
do we have that on screen at all, Maria? That would be brilliant.
No, I don't have that on screen, because we've sort of gone off on a
Haven't we?
on a different.
And we've got the screen of
which is
anxiety,
wonderful.
depression on screen.
But of course, this responds to this, because if we look at this and say, how can we do this better? So the 5 questions,
yes,
are not allowed to be why questions. We are not to ask any why questions. It's what, how, when, where. How, what, when, where.
Who?
How. Who. How,
Okay.
what, when, where, who. So they are the questions that we ask. We avoid at this stage to ask any why questions, because why questions invite anxiety.
Wow. Okay.
The what, the where, the when, the how. See how they are all very concrete. So what they do is that they invite factual information. And when we are working with factual information, we are less likely to spill over into the anxiety. So let's just recap this, because I think it's really important. For the first 3 minutes, pretend you've got tape on and watch your watch. Make sure that you've got your 3 minutes and you're listening. After the 3 minutes, you take the tape off, you go to calm, and you ask one of your 5 questions. You wait for a response. Now, whether that response is relevant or not at this point is irrelevant. Then you ask the next, then you ask the next. Your job as a parent is to get through those 5 questions. The strategy behind this is that when you are asking those 5 questions, what we are doing is that we are calming the limbic area of the child's brain, and we are asking them to think. And when you're asking the child to think, you're asking them to use their prefrontal cortex, even if it takes a long time for them to come to an answer. It doesn't matter. It's not even about the answer. It's about providing them a space, because remember, you're holding their space as they go to calm. You are anchored in your calm, and they are able to think about the question that you're asking, which are questions that only invite factual information. They don't invite story. The minute you ask why, you're asking for a story. And then that flips them again.
So even the question is, don't overthink the question. So long as it starts as wow, as with a what or a how or a when, or a who, you are
where.
You've brought them into a calm state and taken the focus away from the story.
Yeah. So for example, let's go back to the story of Jamie. So Jamie will come to you and says, you know, Mum, it's terrible, and this is what she did, and we were in the, and you know, and she came to me and she scrunched her face and she said, I'm not going to be your friend. I don't want to play with you. And then she gave me a terrible look and walked off. So my first question is, so where were you? Where exactly were you when this happened? Well, we were in the playground. Where were you in the playground? Were you near the swings? Were you near the seat? See that when I ask that question, I'm not feeding into your story. As a parent, I'm asking your brain to now go somewhere else, and you're not so focused on the emotion. And then I might say to you, and then I might say to you, so who was with you? Can you tell me who was around you? And they go, well, I don't know. There was Jamie, and then there was Rebecca, and then there was Samantha, and I go, okay. So can you tell me after that, where did you go? Who did you go to? Who did you talk to? How did you take yourself back to class? So you ask a range of questions that are less about you wanting to fix their problem for them, because all you're wanting to do is calm their biology. And once you calm the biology, the behavior follows. And you will see that once there is a calmness, the communication has a much better opportunity for it to be settled and rational, empathic.
Brilliant.
How are we going for time, Yolanda?
We are hoping to close up. Maria, how can we summarize today? Is there some key points that you wanted to absolutely cover today?
Yeah, so I think what I'd like, I'm just having a look to see just the last thing. Australia's percentage rates at the moment are sitting at 70%, but we need 85% or more to support our children's mental fitness. So really training around resilience becomes very, very important. I think
so this is the parents getting trained.
This is yes,
yeah, beautiful.
Yes, absolutely. And we've got some fantastic training that's coming up. But I think what's important to know is what are the skills of resilience? What are the domains of well-being? What are the tools? What is it that we should be thinking and talking about? So I think the takeaway for tonight is that we have very, very high levels of psychological distress in our society at the moment. And as a result of lockdown and as a result of COVID, confinement has sent our brains into a defense mechanism. It sent our brain into states of defense. And so what we will see in our children are dysregulated behaviors. They could be angry, they could be withdrawn, they could become aggressive, they can start to focus less, they will change their eating habits, they will be more oppositional, they won't want to go to sleep.
We're hearing all of that, Maria, with our parents. We're hearing all of that accentuated since COVID. With our parents, absolutely.
Yes, and as are we. And so it's important for us to know that all of these behaviours are an acting out of our biology. So our biology, our internal system is in such a state of distress that the behaviours are simply an acting out of what is sitting internally for our young people, whether they are children or whether they are adolescents and even young adults, is irrelevant. Yeah,
Mm.
even, yeah.
So resilience is key, and building skills and strengths and learning strategies
Yes.
around resilience for yourself and supporting your kids.
Yes.
Is that
And
correct?
yes, and not to focus just on how bad the behavior is or the deficits. Because if we see this graph, if we were to focus all of our attention on just the deficit and saying, well, we need to fix that, we're missing the point. Because if we were to develop the resilience and place more of our attention on well-being, on developing the tools of well-being, our symptoms naturally begin to de-escalate by way of strengthening what's good about us rather than just focusing on what's bad about us.
Can I ask you one last question,
Please
Maria?
do.
You mentioned the mood meter. How is that applicable? And we'd love to hear about that before we close for today.
Let me just see if I can show this to you. Can you see that, Yolanda?
Yes, I can. We've just got a question, Maria.
Yes, please.
And it's saying, what can you tell parents of teens who feel it's too late to change their parenting style?
Wow. My first response to that is that it is never too late to change your parenting style. I think the challenge is how hard it feels for us when we need to make a change. And there is a very big piece behind that, in that you have all that is required to be a good parent. And sometimes it's not about learning something new, but it's just about doing one thing different. And if you are to do one thing different over a period of time, say 6 to 8 weeks, you will find that that one small difference has had an impact. And that may just be learning to just put an imaginary tape across your lips and hold that for 3 minutes. And 3 minutes is a long time when you have something to say. And sometimes it's about that when you are in an interaction with your young person, rather than standing, sit. So doing these small things may mean that it just has a small shift, but one that's powerful enough for your child to realize that you're trying as much as what they are.
Absolutely. So often parents can think they've got to change their whole parenting style, and the problem feels so much bigger. So I love your approach, one step at a time. Sit down while your child is something that you may have never done or not even been aware of.
Correct.
Something small like that can even shock your child into thinking, oh my gosh, I am being listened to. There is change happening, which invites change within themselves. So small steps. Brilliant. Well done.
So the mood meter is a very, very powerful tool. And Yolanda, we may not have time to go through this today, but there is an app called the Mood Meter app on your phones, and it comes from Yale. Yeah, it comes from Yale University. And Yale University have done, Professor Mark Beckett has done a whole lot of work on this. So maybe it might just be enough to say, have a look at it on the app, but go onto the website and have a look at the mood meter. And what this does is that it gives parents an opportunity to begin to use emotional literacy, how we talk about how we're feeling and how we encourage our children to talk about how they are feeling, and that emotions can be categorized into these blocks. But there's more to say, but I think to start off with the fact that there is this tool to go to, and I encourage parents to go and have a look.
Just bringing awareness. Yeah,
bringing awareness. But when I am able to name how I feel, I will be less likely to act that emotion out. Beautiful. The more likely I am to hold my emotion and not talk about it, the more likely you will see me act that out, especially the emotions to the left. So if I don't talk to you about how frustrated I am, or if I don't talk to you about how worried I am, you're going to see that come out in my behavior. I get fidgety, I tap a lot, I get really aggressive. But if I'm able to find the language and name how I am feeling, and put that in a sentence, I'm less likely for that emotion to then dominate my behavior.
Beautiful. We call it recognize and allow. In empowered parenting, we say recognize it, allow it, so you're not resisting it anymore before we go into the questioning and then into the nurturing.
Lovely. That's beautiful. So that I would encourage parents, if they would like to download the app, this has nothing to do with me, it's all Yale University. I would say follow, it's a very simple process, but follow it for about 4 to 6 weeks, and see where you land yourself, because it is a fantastic tool to use.
Brilliant. Thank you for that tool, Maria, and thank you for joining us. We know you have a program coming up, and we are very excited. If you can just give us a brief about this resilience program, because like you said, resilience is the answer. The awareness of these strategies are key, and you don't have to have a child that's facing anxiety or depression in order to be able to become aware of these tools and learn these skills.
Yeah, so we have developed a program called Resilience First Aid, and what it is that they are first aid tools to give to either parents or executives or principals or people who are working in positions where they are working with other people. And what we do is that we teach proactive conversations of care. We talk about the 6 domains of resilience, we teach what they are, and we then look at how do we apply them. In the program, there is an opportunity to measure your own resilience. So you're given a survey measure, you get to work with that, but you get a first aid kit that has all the resilience tools in there. It's a fantastic. You get a little swish ball. You get all sorts of things. And we're running it this year as a retreat in Hillsville in Victoria on the 5th and 6th of June. So we would love to have as many people come along as possible. It is an outstanding program. It is nationally accredited. So we have national accreditation as well as certification. So it's and it's based on neuroscience.
Beautiful. And we will have a link. So parents, we've got a link in the comment section that gives you details about this program, and you can click into it to know what all is involved. And we are, I'm looking forward to joining that program as well. And thank you so much, Maria. We would love to have you on again. You shared a few points where you mentioned that you couldn't go into detail. We will have feedback from the parents who have watched us today. We've had a lot of parents join us today and share how much they've learned in this short while. So we will be in touch with you to have you again.
Lovely.
We love the biology behind behavior. It just gives parents that reason to stop, that there might be more to this behavior. There might be
correct,
science behind it. There's neuroscience behind it, and it's not just that my child wants to piss me off. Your child doesn't wake up in the night saying, I want to piss I want to get my mom or dad frustrated.
Correct. No, not at all. And in fact, children are so desperate for the love of their parent that sometimes when they are flooded or overwhelmed, they find it very difficult to ask for help. Yeah.
So these tools are available for parents, and they certainly are, to bring that calm and peace in your family.
Thank you, Yolanda, for your time.
Thank you for joining us today. And
my
parents,
pleasure.
Do jump on the link. We will tag Maria. Maria, can we tag you on here as well?
Yes, absolutely.
So if they've got that if they're interested to know more about your work, we look forward to that.
Yes.